In the midst of the holiday season, many Americans, especially those who will be traveling, are worried about terrorism. And I want to talk about this with Juliette Kayyem, national security analyst, Rula Jibril, foreign policy analyst and author of Mirror, and attorney Alan Dershowitz. His latest book is Abraham, the world's first but certainly not last Jewish lawyer. I love that title so much, I can't really tell you how much.
Well,
it's very clever on so many levels, so thank you.
It.
Juliette, to you first. Let's start with what President Obama said today, speaking after a briefing at the National Counterterrorism Center.
At this moment, our intelligence and counterterrorism professionals do not have any specific and credible information about an attack on the homeland. That said, we have to be vigilant.
So the San Bernardino attack came out of the blue. So how reassuring is that statement?
It's not very reassuring, but it's very honest. I mean, look, in these cases that we're now seeing, the likelihood that law enforcement is going to be able to disrupt every single one of them is relatively low, and the American public knows it. Recent polling shows that most Americans recognize that if these guys are radicalizing on their own, have access to guns relatively easy, and we have an infinite number of soft targets in this country, that we may not get to zero, but we can try to be safer. So the president is just simply trying to reclaim a narrative about his counterterrorism efforts from the noise that you're hearing from the other side, which is suggesting that if we only bomb more or not allow Muslims in, that there'll be peace on earth. And no one practically actually thinks that.
So listen, Juliette, I said that it came out of the blue, but there are those who would say, you know what, it didn't come out of the blue. We should have been expecting something like this. Not that it should have been, it should have happened. Go ahead.
You know, Don, we do expect it, and people are working incredibly hard to stop threats that we may not know about, to make it harder for people to communicate, to make it harder to plan a massive attack like what we saw on 9/11. And people do actually know that maybe something is amiss, but those people are not law enforcement. They are the community, they are the family, they are the mother who's living in the apartment, the friend who lives next door. And if you think, or if anyone thinks, that having law enforcement go at war with those communities is actually the way to get information from them or to get them involved with the homeland security, because it's their homeland too, it's delusional. I mean, everyone knows. Look, if you look at the urban riots in the 1970s, all white police departments learned that they had to integrate and that they had to go about working with communities through something called community policing. That is, that they cooperate with the communities that they're policing. That has worked for the most part, not perfect as we've certainly seen in the last year or two, but it has worked for the most part. It's the same thing in counterterrorism. We don't need to do things that are not only un-American, but anyone in counterterrorism knows they're going to be exceptionally ineffective.
Before I get to Alan, I want to ask you this. A new Washington Post ABC poll, this is what it shows. It says 77% of Americans doubt the government can prevent a lone wolf attack. Does that feel like a reasonable assessment to you?
It does, and I think Julia is absolutely right. We have always had to strike an uncomfortable balance between doing too much to prevent terrorism and too little, between compromising our civil liberties too much or not doing enough. It's a very difficult balance to strike. We'll never get to zero, particularly with lone wolves. We overdo it. The pendulum swings very, very widely. But we have to take additional steps, more than what we've been taking in the past. Disneyland is a perfect example. Yes, metal detectors, but no, not racial profiling.
Rula, let's talk about some of this, because you and I have discussed this recently, and we were talking about other issues, about how the terrorists in the Paris attacks, they use apps like WhatsApp. They use this Telegram app that uses encryption to hide their communication. James Comey, who's the FBI director, says that tech companies should work with the government to unlock encryption. Do you think encryption should be illegal altogether, Rula?
Absolutely not. I mean, look, I think we should have this conversation in this country, but also we should have this conversation in Congress. I mean, it should be lawful. Whatever they decide, it should be lawful. Because the worst thing is, in this process, we dismantle our democracy. So far, it was not lawful, and that's why the Snowden files came out. But what I want to say about these attacks, actually, is basically there's a difference between what happened in France and what happened here. What happened in France was operational. The overwhelming majority of these foreign fighters went to Syria, trained in Syria, or eventually in Iraq. These people here in this country, and the San Bernardino attack, it was inspirational, meaning they go online. This is why it's hard to track down and to find out. The overwhelming majority of the people that were actually arrested, the Kawachi brothers and others who were killed in Charlie Hebdo attacks, they posted on social media. It was not encrypted. It was not about collecting data. It was about analyzing those data. That's why you need the Muslim community who speak Urdu, who speak Arabic, who speak all kinds of languages. The idea of if you see something, say something, is the most powerful, eloquent idea in the war on terror. And cooperation, 60% of attacks who were dismantled and actually the FBI and the police managed to stop them, it's because the Muslim community managed to tell information and give information.
But there were people who were not in the Muslim community, at least this is what they're saying to news operations, is that they were afraid to, when they saw something, to say something because they were afraid of being called xenophobic or Islamophobic. So then,
well, then
what do
we
you
need
do
to create an awareness. I would look at the data that we have. Look, I studied the Middle East for a long time. I come from the Middle East. I've seen what police state are managed to do. So whoever is endorsing banning Muslims on torture and oppression, look at police state. Did they work out well? They did not. Look at Egypt. They produce these torture chambers and oppressive policies produce mass radicalization, an entire generation of people who were radicalized.
But you asked about the internet, and I do think we cannot retain the status quo on the internet. Here you have Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton both trying to start a debate about how we can turn the internet from a weapon that is now being used, both the encryption and the incitement, and at least think about whether there are smart ways consistent with civil liberties of turning the internet into a weapon against terrorism rather than just a weapon used by terrorism. Can we do that without unduly diminishing privacy rights, unduly circumscribing of speech rights? That's the hard question. And both of those candidates are asking that question.
Hold that thought, everyone. And Juliet, we'll get to you after the break, because I know you have more to weigh in on this when we come back. So everyone stay with me. When we come right back, why is the reaction to a mass shooting different when it's a terror attack motivated by Islam? I want the group to weigh in on that. Are we really willing to give up some of our freedoms to be safe? Back with me now, Juliet Kayyem, Rula Jibril, and Alan Dershowitz. I think that's a very good question. Before we talk about that, but Juliet, I want to ask you about Enrique Marquez. He's a friend of the San Bernardino killer, who authorities believe bought the 2 assault rifles used in the killings. He was arrested today. He said that Farouk was worried that it would be a red flag if he bought too many guns because Farouk looked Middle Eastern, and it was easier for a Marquez to buy a gun than a Farouk. Is that true?
In Marquez's mind, it's true. Remember, this is a man who sort of entered a mental facility the day of the attacks, and the FBI is clearly treading cautiously about how they treat them. They don't want a judge to determine that he is not a valid witness, let alone a defendant. Look, in these cases, I know a lot about these cases, these big terrorism cases. The FBI is charging him to find out the bigger picture. In other words, whether there's a plea offer so that he gets less time, that shouldn't matter to us. The smaller fish are less important than understanding the entire enterprise that led to the tragedy at San Bernardino. So I think this is just a move by the FBI to begin some plea arrangement.
Alan, the unfortunate truth is that for decades in this country there have been mass shootings. That's really an unfortunate truth. Why is the response so different now that the shootings were carried out by Muslims and motivated by terror?
Well, first, because we're afraid it's part of a larger plan. ISIS has indicated that it wants to come to American shores and it wants to destroy our freedom and kill our people. So we worry more about part of a large plan than we do about isolated instances, but isolated instances endanger us greatly. If you think of some of the great terrorist attacks that have occurred in this country, they've been committed by white, quote, patriots who think they're doing the right thing. So we have to be concerned with all kinds of terrorism.
We'll continue with this, but I want you to hear this because there's a real debate on Tuesday about how to keep the country safe. Here it is.
So are you open to closing parts of the internet? I would certainly be open to closing areas where we are at war with somebody. I sure as hell don't want to let people that want to kill us and kill our nation use our internet. Yes, sir, I am.
I think we defeat terrorism by showing them that we do not fear them. I think if we ban certain religions, if we censor the internet, I think that at that point the terrorists will have won.
Which one's right?
Oh, absolutely. Look, it's a battle of idea. You cannot win it by shutting down internet and oppressing your own community. What happened today is the anniversary of the Arab Spring. It's the anniversary. 5 years ago, a man in Tunisia, Mohammed Abu Said, set himself on fire and changed the Arab Spring. What they were asking, not to join ISIS, they were asking three things: freedom, democracy, and social justice. These are American values. We need to tap into those values and promote those values in these countries so they can actually defeat themselves, ISIS and the Islamic State. And regarding what Alan said, actually, internet will help us in this battle of idea. While ISIS is promoting images from babies killed in Gaza and in Iraq and elsewhere, we can actually promote other things to actually dismantle this ideology.
Look, every modern technology, from the book to fire to electricity, has both served the interests of democracy and the interests of our enemies. So we have to learn how to harness the new technology to help us and not allow it to be used against us.
Juliet, I hear you're agreeing, but we're out of time. But thank you.
Okay.
You know, we'll have you back. Thank you very much. We appreciate all of you. We'll be right back, everyone.
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.